What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast and odds.com. This is Total Madness for UFC 258. What we do on this show is not just look at who's going to win or lose these fights. We are going to break them down from a perspective of, will they go the distance? Over 1.5, under 2.5. Are we betting on violence? Are we expecting a finish? Are we thinking it's going to be a grinding affair that goes all the way to the judges' scorecards where you're praying and you're chomping on your nails, hoping they get the decision correct? That's what we're looking at to try and find some alternative ways to make some cash and find some value on these UFC fights. First things first, do me a favor, smash that like button. Give this video a share. Appreciate your support. Thank you all very much. Let's dig straight on into the fights. We got a lot to talk about. Women's flyweight kicks off the night. Robertson taking on Maverick. This is a fight between two young up-and-coming prospects. Robertson has been around for a little bit. She's kind of earned her stripes here in the UFC. We know she's a violent submission finisher when she's able to get her opponents on the ground, when she's in top position, and she's also not a stranger to being able to snatch something from bottom position. Maverick has only had one UFC fight that ended in a first-round doctor stoppage between rounds. She is known as being a finisher. She's got some hard hands, good submissions, good wrestling herself, but she's taken a really big step up in competition here in this spot. We've got a total set at 2.5 for this one. Over 1.5 is minus 185. Under 2.5 is plus 160. And this is one where we might be getting that value on women's MMA. Women's MMA more often than not goes to the judges' scorecards. There's not a whole lot of finishes more often than not. But in this particular case, Maverick can absolutely be exposed by someone like Robertson on the mat. I think that Robertson has a very clear path to a submission victory in this fight. Likewise, Maverick is going to have an advantage on the feet, and we've seen that she hits very, very hard. If she gets top position on Robertson, there could be a ground and pound element to this as well. Both women have a path to finishing and being finished, and the total is set at plus 160 for the under 2.5. I don't mind those odds whatsoever, and I wouldn't mind taking a shot on this under. It's one that I've been staring at pretty hard. I've already got a bet on this fight. It is not on the total, and because of that, I am a little bit hesitant to put a second bet on the very first fight of the night, but if I was going to play it, the under 2.5 is the way that I'd look, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm very tempted to double up here in this spot. Next up, we've got a welterweight fight between Gabe Green and Philip Rowe. These guys are both relatively new to the UFC. Philip Rowe coming off a Dana White Contender Series, and then Gabe Green has had one fight in the UFC. This is one where I don't have a very good feel for the way these fighters really manage each other or themselves inside the cage. What I know is they're both capable of finishing. This is a spot where if I had to make a bet, I would look at the under 2.5 once again. We're in the small cage. We're in the apex. These guys are going to be forced to engage, and Phil Rowe has a 100% finish rate in his wins. Neither of them have a ton of losses. We've got 9-3, 7-2 for the record, so it's not like these guys are fully capable of being finished, and we expect to see it a lot, but the way they fight, you expect them to be kill or be killed. The under 2.5 is just minus 120, minus 125. That would be the way that I look, but take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is the weakest read that I feel I have on the entire card, so I'm probably not planning on pulling the trigger on this one. Next up for the early preliminary card, we've got Ricky Simón taking on Brian Boom Kelleher, a fight that I am very, very excited about. A total here set at 2.5. Over 2.5 is minus 270. The under 2.5 plus 175. Ricky Simón is a grinder, just a heavy, heavy grappler. He looks to wet blanket, lay on top of you, smother you for 15 minutes, and get that judge's decision. Brian Kelleher is a very, very experienced grappler. He knows how to use that wrestling in reverse. He's got a good get-up game, and he packs a punch. Not only that, but he's got a nasty guillotine on him, so both options are available to him for finishing this fight. You kind of think that if Brian Kelleher is going to win, it's going to be by finish. And if Ricky Simón is going to win, it's going to be by decision. So this total kind of correlates with your fighter. If you think that Ricky Simón is going to be the victor here, that minus 250 to the over, not a bad way to look. And if somehow Brian squeezes out a split decision victory, you've covered yourself. The under 2.5 at plus 175, that's almost the same thing as a bet on Brian Kelleher because Ricky Simón is just never finishing this fight. This is a total that I have no interest versed in playing, and I think that the over 2.5 would be the safer play, although I think there's some very serious opportunity for Brian Kelleher to finish this fight. Ricky Simón has had some chin questions. He's also had some gas tank questions, and with him diving in for that takedown, Brian Kelleher is going to have every opportunity to land that sick guillotine on him. So I do think Brian Kelleher is live as an underdog in this spot, and I do think he's live for a finish. So even though the odds and the numbers all say that this fight should make it to the judges' scorecards, it's not one I like to step in front of. Next up, we've got Andre Ewell taking on Chris Gutierrez. This is a short notice fill-in fight. These guys just got this fight put together and added to the card. Andre Ewell, tall, long, lanky. It's going to be a 140-pound catch weight. He's used to fighting at 135. Chris, on the other side, is used to fighting at 145. Chris is very, very well known for his vicious leg kick attack. That's his primary offense and something we've seen him absolutely beat people into the canvas with. They just can't stand on their legs after a round or two of this guy's attacks. What we've got is a total here set over 2.5 is minus 225, under 2.5 is plus 185. And normally speaking, this is a spot where I like both of my fighters to be able to contribute to an under cashing, and we kind of have that. So Andre Ewell is more of a decision fighter. He does have some pretty solid counter striking. Like I said, he's very, very long. He's got good hands. So the question for a knockout, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. One big thing that he does to help contribute to my unders cashing is he gasses out. Andre Ewell in round 2 and round 3 is just not the same fighter that he is in round 1. Chris Gutierrez does not have that problem, and he's a vicious striker all the way through the entire fight. The problem for Gutierrez is when you've got someone like Cody Durden who's able to grapple with him, wrestle with him, slow him down just a little bit so he can't utilize that striking. Andre Ewell's not shooting for takedowns in this fight, folks. I like this under 2.5. Plus 185 is music to my ears because either Andre Ewell will step up in this spot and he'll have something for Gutierrez on the feet, or he's going to do what he usually does, gas out or get his leg beat off by Chris Gutierrez, and will help me cash the under by being less than durable in that second or third round. I think this is Gutierrez. I think this is Gutierrez by leg kick TKO, and I would predict the second or the third round in this spot. So the total, maybe not my favorite play on the board because you could probably take Gutierrez by knockout, and I feel like that's a bit of a safer bet. But if Andre Ewell does come out and does do something crazy in round 1, that does cover you if you play that under 2.5. Either way, I don't think this fight is going the distance for some reason, and the plus 185 for the sake of this show would be the direction I would look. We've got a women's strawweight fight, Viana taking on Mallory Martin. Viana is a pretty solid jiu-jitsu player, very tall, very lanky, long, knows how to strike at range, and hits pretty hard, surprisingly hard actually. Mallory Martin is just kind of starting to prove herself in the UFC. Real tough, hard-nosed, grinder, grappler type. She's got some nasty ground and pound, decent offensive submissions from Top Game. This is another spot where I feel like the women might be the answer this weekend, folks. I feel like they might steal the show at UFC 258. We've got a total set at 2.5, and it is juiced minus 235 to the over, plus 195 or plus 200 to the under 2.5 rounds. And I feel like that under 2.5 is totally live. Viana is the type of fighter that she will snatch your arm 30 seconds into the fight and force you to tap out. She has that capability. And on the flip side of this thing, Mallory Martin is the kind of fighter that's going to wear you out, and when you get tired, she will take advantage of that and start pounding. This is going to be a ground game fight. There's going to be grappling in here, and because of that, I think both women are totally live to get submitted or do the submissions themselves, and of course, the TKO opportunity for Viana on the feet, Martin on the ground. I think there's a high chance of violence here, and that plus 195 is a spot that I'm liking more and more. I may make that an official bet and put some real live money on that myself. Next up, we've got a welterweight fight between Belal, remember the name, Muhhamad, and Diego Lima. Really, really fun fight. Belal, the biggest favorite here on the card this weekend. Total once again set at 2.5 rounds. This is a pattern this weekend, folks. Totals are at 2.5. Over is minus 250. Under is plus 190. And what we've got here is a spot where Diego Lima could potentially land something on the feet, clip Belal, and put him away. That's kind of his only path to victory. I really don't see that happening. Belal is probably going to be too elusive on the feet for him, be all in or all out, and then close the distance, get in on Lima, take him down, and I think the chance of a submission is relatively high for Bilal because he's got such a sick ground game and such good wrestling. Once he gets control positions on the mat, I don't know if Lima's going to have much of an answer. However, Lima's been very tenacious in his last couple of fights. He's got a half-decent get-up game on him, and like I said, that threat on the feet, there's always that chance that he can return fire. I don't know if these guys are going to maybe respect each other too much. Bilal might want to get out of Dodge with just a win under his belt. So while the under 2.5 is enticing, and I think both guys have the ability to contribute to it, it's not really one that I'm interested in playing. And at the same time, y'all know me, I don't lay big chalk on the overs. I don't want to put minus 250 on the over, even though I feel like that's the way this one's going to go. This fight is a pass from my perspective. Middleweight fight. Rodolfo Vieira, the black belt hunter, taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I love the name. I just got to say it every single time. We have a total set at 1.5 this time. We got something new to talk about. Total's 1.5. The over is plus 120. The under is minus 150. The odds makers and Vegas are not expecting this fight to last very long, and that makes sense. The undefeated 7-0 Rodolfo Vieira is a guy that just has a ridiculous ground game. He's built like a brick shithouse. He takes people down, smothers them, chokes them out, and beats them into submission as quickly as humanly possible, cashes his check, and gets the hell out of Dodge. You expect to see the same thing here when he takes on Anthony Hernandez, a guy that was physically bullied by Marquez Perez and submitted in the second round of their fight. If Perez can do that, Vieira can probably do it faster. Now, we don't want to count Hernandez completely out of this thing. He does have a decent ground game himself. He's a long, rangy striker, and he's got some serious heat on his punches when he can connect with people at range. So if Rodolfo Vieira is not able to get that takedown for whatever reason, if Anthony can somehow manage to keep this fight standing, we don't know what Rodolfo looks like. We don't know how his gas tank looks after the first round. We don't know if he can be the nail in an MMA fight and take the punches coming from the other direction. This is another spot where I have to kind of agree with it going under 1.5, but I think it's going to hit the second round. Something is telling me that this fight gets out of the first, and you're going to be sweating those first 2 minutes and 30 seconds of round 2 for this bet to cash, and it might just squeeze over. I don't see this fight going to round 3, but I could absolutely see a round 2 TKO for Anthony Hernandez or a potential round 2 submission for Vieira after Hernandez has just been beaten down after defending all the takedowns he can in round 1 and gets put right back on the mat in round 2. It might be time to tap out and give up at that point. So it's a little too close for comfort for me. I do agree with the under. I think we see a finish, but again, it's one I'm going to pass because I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with that 1.5 number. If I'm taking an under 1.5, I've got to be really confident and really sure that that is coming through. Middleweight fight, Maki Pitolo taking on Julian Marquez. Julian Marquez is the Cuban Missile Crisis. Maki Pitolo is coconut bombs. And this is a total that I like. We've got the 1.5 here. Over 1.5 is minus 170. Under 1.5 is plus 150. And once again, I think there's value on that under. Maki Pitolo is a brawler. This is a guy that just comes in and goes to war every time we see him in the cage. And Julian Marquez is not the guy you want to do that against. The Cuban Missile Crisis is named that for the reason. He's got bombs in his hands. This guy looks to unload nukes on the feet. And on top of that, he's a decent wrestler and he's got a 6 submission game on him. We've seen Maki Pitolo cave. We've seen him get an early knockout and be able to just roll through people. But when he can't get that finish, when his opponents start to put it on him, he tends to break. And because of that, I see Julian Marquez having some success breaking down Maki Pitolo. And once he does, I think it's just going to be bombs away. I think Julian Marquez finishes this fight. I don't know if it comes late at the end of the first round or early at the beginning of the second round, but I think getting that plus line with the amount of finishing power these two fighters have, under 1.5 is going to be the way to look. Again, I am not a huge fan of playing these 1.5 unders though, so this one is not going to make my betting slip for the weekend, but that's the way that I would look if you wanted to have any action on that particular fight. Lightweight fight, Jim Miller taking on Bobby King Green. Here we go. Jim Miller is a first-round sub or bust fighter. I've just got to get that out of the way. He is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and this guy simply never seems to slow down in that first round. Now, when round 2 comes around, that's a completely different story. He blows his load trying to get his opponents out of there as quickly as possible, and when he can't do that and he kind of settles into a striker's game, he doesn't really do so well. He is just not the same guy in round 2 and 3 as he was in round 1, and because of that, I think that leaves him very, very much open to being exploited and finished in the later rounds. Bobby Green, on the flip side of this thing, is a fighter that plays to the level of his opponents. We've seen him make some very, very poor choices, and as much as I think he should just steamroll Jim Miller in this fight, we have seen Bobby Green take down Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts just because that's the kind of guy that he is. He wants to prove a point, and he's willing to put himself in dangerous way to do it. That's not the game that you want to play with Jim freaking Miller. What we have a total set at 2.5 here. Over 2.5 is minus 270. The under 2.5 is plus 230. And call me crazy, I think I like the under here. I think there's a very real possibility that Bobby Green lands the first knockout he's had in years in his UFC career, because the volume he brings to the table is something that Jim Miller simply can't handle on the feet. It's not that Bobby Green is this crazy knockout artist. It's not that he just hits so freaking hard, but he's been this close to knocking out his last 3 or 4 opponents in their fights, but he just takes his foot off the gas at the last second, lets them survive, lets them get through it, and then goes back to his volume style. Someone like Jim Miller, who's just exhausted in the second or the third round, is not going to be able to come back from that rocking. He's going to take that punch a whole lot harder at his advanced stage and more than likely go down. We've seen him finished before. And then, like I said, we talked about Jim Miller's ability to submit people. Bobby Green's submission defense is on point, but that doesn't make him on the level of Jim Miller. Miller can submit anybody in that first round. So the under 2.5, getting plus 230 on that number, plus 215 on that number, I think that's the way to go in this fight. However, I've got just a little bit more of an advantage for you. In this particular case, let's talk fight doesn't go to decision. You can take that prop bet instead, get yourself an extra 2 minutes and 30 seconds of fight time, and get plus 185. That, I think, is the way to go. Because if Bobby Green is able to get that knockout, it might come in the last 2 minutes of the fight. It might be that moment when he decides, I'm not letting the judges rob me again. I'm not letting this go to the scorecards. And Jim Miller just has nothing left to give in that third round. I think there's a finish in this fight, and I think both guys are actually more than capable of doing it. I don't want to trust either of them on the money line, but I have no problem betting on violence. And I'm also going to be sprinkling that Bobby Green round 3 prop. Next up, we've got a middleweight fight. Kelvin Gastelum taking on Ian the Hurricane Heinisch in a fight where Kelvin Gastelum really has his back up against the wall. I mean, he's got to win this fight. Otherwise, he falls completely out of the title picture and might even get dropped from the UFC. I mean, he's enough of a fan favorite that I don't think he'll actually get cut from the UFC in this fight, but an 0-4 skid, that doesn't look good, and not many people survive going 0-4 in the UFC. Total here set at 2.5. The over is minus 250. The under is plus 175. And this is a spot where I just have to full-on agree with the over. I don't see anybody getting finished here. Ian Heinisch has been showing lately that he wants to, believe in his striking, sit on his punches a little bit more, and go to war, but he's been fighting some really chinny fighters. The people he's knocked out are not people we should be impressed with him having knocked out. Kelvin Gastelum, he's got extremely fast hands. We know he's dangerous on the feet. We know this guy can go to war with anybody on the feet, but at the same time, Ian Heinisch is not a man who is really been knocked out all that much. We're not used to seeing Ian the Hurricane Heinisch be finished. So I'm not going to say that a slumping Kelvin Gastelum, who really is just looking to lock up that win, just get back in the win column. I don't think he's going to go for broke here. I don't think he's going to come out and put his chin on the line. I think he's going to do whatever it takes to get to the scorecards and get that win. So because of that, I think this is going to be close. I think it's going to get squeezed out, and I think we're going to make it over. So as much as I don't want to lay that chalk, the minus 250 is the way to look on this fight. Coming up here, we got the co-main event, yet another women's MMA fight, and a banging one at that. Maycee Barber taking on Alexa Grasso. I don't think this should be the co-main event, but I can't deny that I love this fight. This is going to be fireworks. It's going to be fun. Two hungry, young, up-and-coming contenders. Alexa Grasso, a personal favorite of mine. Big fan of her and what she does. I like her boxing, her tight, fast hands. She's got a sneaky head kick that she mixes in there. Girl's got some skills. Macy Barber, we saw her get upset by Roxanne Modafferi. She had her O taken from her. She's now 8-1, and the UFC is really still trying to make something of her. Macy Barber just has this raw physicality, this power that she brings into the cage with her that most flyweights are not used to seeing in the women's division. Because of that, she's able to cover up some holes in her striking game and be able to finish fights that she was otherwise losing. That's something that you want to bet on. That's something that if you've got that ability to just end the fight at any point in time, it's not a bad skill set. Now, Alexa Grasso, even though she's more technical on the feet, even though she's a much more solid striker, she has a problem with hooks. We've seen her get beaten to a pulp by women who have a reach advantage or have a wide winging hook, and that's exactly what Macy Barber brings to the table. Macy Barber, on the flip side of things, drops her hands. She comes in completely disrespecting her opponent's power and looks to trade one for one and just has confidence that her chin will hold up and she'll hit harder than her opponent. Because of that, we have a perfect mixture for another undercashing, and we have the bias of these people in Vegas setting these lines that women's MMA go to the scorecards all the time, and we're getting a beautiful line. I made this bet official at plus 210. We've got plus 200, plus 205. There's a plus 215 hanging out there, but I don't expect it to last very long. I would jump on this under 2.5. I like this under 2.5. I think Macy Barber can hook Grasso in a big way, put her down. If Barber decides to grapple, I think she can ground and pound Grasso. Grasso can out-technique Macy Barber, and when she gets flustered and she takes a bad charge in, she can catch her with something big, maybe even that head kick that we discussed. Both women absolutely can finish this fight. They're both absolutely capable of putting their opponent's lights out, and because of that, I really like this under 2.5. Book it. Next up, we got the main event. Welterweight action, Kamaru Usman taking on my boy, Gilbert freaking Burns. Total here set at 4.5 because this is a Kamaru Usman fight. We all know he's willing to embrace the grind. He's willing to make the fight boring. He will press you up against the cage. He will stomp on your foot. He will shoulder check you. He'll do whatever it takes to score and leave you incapable of doing anything. However, he's fighting a comparable grappler. And what we saw the last time he fought a comparable grappler is he went to war with Colby Chaos Covington. Covington was a guy that could match his wrestling prowess. So what did they do? They stood in the center of the cage for 25 minutes and they threw down. I kind of expect the same thing to happen. If they get into a grappling game, I think Burns goes to work with his jiu-jitsu and we see a bit more of a scramble fest rather than your wrestling versus my wrestling. So because of that, I think there's going to be opportunities. I think there's going to be opportunities for both men to land finishes. And because of that, I like the plus money. I like the opportunity on the under 4.5 here. I think that Usman working with Justin Gaethje is going to just pay off dividends for his striking ability. And Gilbert Burns, while I don't personally have any doubts about his gas tank and his ability to go 25 minutes, when you go 25 minutes with Kamaru Usman, that's a different level. That is a different ask of a fighter to put in that kind of effort and then still have it late in the fight. So because of that, there's the opportunity for my boy Gilbert Burns to just be on the wrong side of the physicality here and get worn down. And if he does, I think Usman would look to make a statement. I think much like the Colby Covington fight, Usman would look for that finish late in the fight. I do think there's an opportunity for Gilbert Burns to finish literally anybody in the UFC early on. He's got that kind of striking ability and he's got that type of grappling and submission ability. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this fight to go under. The only problem is the durability of both men. We've seen Gilbert Burns knocked out, but that was at 155 where he was sucking himself down to that weight class, something he never should have been doing. And we see fighters struggle with that because they're taking the water out of their brain, and then they're slim pickings for somebody who's got a lot of power at the weight class. Since then, he hasn't been finished. He hasn't shown any signs of being rocked or having problems. There's no durability concerns with Burns. And Usman is 17-1. There's no durability concerns with Usman whatsoever. So because of that, I am not just smashing this. This is not a home run spot because both guys are more than capable of finishing, but their durability really takes away from their opponent's ability to get that finish. I'm hopeful for a finish. I'm hoping Gilbert Burns is the guy that gets it done, and I want him to do it by knockout, but I'm a little hesitant on this one. If I was going to play this fight straight, if we were just going to look at the total, the under 4.5, or the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 110, Those would be the ways that I would look from a totals perspective. That's Total Madness. Thank you all very much for hanging out with me. Good luck on all your action at UFC 258. Once again, do me a favor, smash that like button. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world here to us. Good luck and have a great week. Let's roll.